And I remember I walked into a store one time to try to sell my laptop envelopes, and they said, yeah, these are cute, but why don't you make them a little smaller and just make them into handbags? And I was like, great idea. I'll be back in 2 days. So I went home and made smaller versions and brought them back and sold them there.
Hey everyone, we're here on the Founder Hour podcast with our guest, Clare Vivier. Clare, we're so glad to be here at your offices, and we're excited for the conversation that we're going to have about, your upbringing and kind of a few relevant topics, whether it's fashion or mental health or being a woman in the industry. So thank you so much for taking time to be with us.
Thank you for coming.
So I want to kick it off kind of just casually. I was watching your Instagram stories earlier, and I saw that you were in San Francisco today. What was going on up there?
I was up. Well, we have a store up there. That's our 7th store. Mm-hmm. We opened it last June, so a year ago, and we quite often have events at our stores. And last night was an event at our San Francisco store. It was an event with a blogger called the Glitter Guide, Taylor Sterling of the Glitter Guide. Mm-hmm. She was celebrating her 7th anniversary.
7th anniversary, 7th store.
Yeah, 7. It made sense. She's been a great supporter of the line for the past 7 years, mm-hmm. and she's up in the Bay Area. We have a lot of the same. She has the same readers as our customers. It just made sense to have an event together, and it was really fun.
Is this the first podcast you've ever been on?
Second, I believe.
Second, okay.
Yes.
It's good enough. I feel like top 3 is good.
Yes.
Top 3 is good.
Yes, but I listen to podcasts all the time.
Awesome. Which one's your favorite?
I love How I Built This.
Love it.
And I love...
We definitely drew a lot of inspiration from...
Yeah, I love Pod Save America, and The Daily, which is New York Times Daily podcast. A fun one that I've been listening to lately, it's really lighthearted, is In the Limelight. It's Vanity Fair's pop culture.
Is that a new one? I thought
perhaps in the last year, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very...
They have a Kevin Hart episode.
Yeah, they do.
Awesome. Well, why don't we jump in? So, Claire, did you grow up in LA?
I didn't. I grew up in Minnesota. I grew up in St. Paul, Minnesota, last of 6 kids. We actually moved there from Indiana when I was 2. My father at the time was a professor at the University of Minnesota, and we moved up for his job.
What did he teach?
He went up to be the chair of the Chicano Studies department.
Wow.
And he was teaching law and Chicano Studies. And
I know that you're also Latin background, is that correct?
Yeah, my father's Mexican.
Okay.
He's first generation American, so I'm obviously second generation. Yeah.
And ended up marrying a French guy?
Yes. And then I met my husband when I was 24 years old and living in France.
Very cool, very cool. I want to get into that because I'm interested to see, what your life was like in France. When did you first come out to LA?
In 2001, we moved here from the Bay Area, from France. I had gone to school in San Francisco, so after I finished college, I moved to Paris, and I stayed for a year, and then we went I met my husband, we went back to the Bay Area, and lived there for a few years, and then moved down here in 2001.
Did you always know that you want to be involved in fashion, or, is it something that you just stumbled upon, after you came out here?
I did. Well, to be clear, I always wanted to work in fashion, but I didn't know in what capacity that would be. I didn't think that I wanted to be a fashion designer, so I thought maybe I would be a fashion journalist because I liked writing and I liked the industry so much that was kind of going to be my entry into the industry. But
is that what you studied in college? Was it journalism?
I studied English.
Okay. And so I guess why did you move to Paris after graduating college? Was that for like a job, or was it just to explore the world, or
it was really to explore the world. I had I think I had an attraction to these cosmopolitan cities, and really, I was at the time in San Francisco, and I had lived in New York for a summer to go live with a boyfriend for a while, and feel like I got New York kind of out of my system just by living there for 4 months with a boyfriend, and I loved it, and I still love New York, but didn't feel like I wanted to go back and live there. But Paris really piqued my interest just because it was such a cosmopolitan, beautiful city. I mean, seemingly beautiful. I'd never visited it. And also because its relation to the fashion industry. I knew that I wanted to go just see the women and be around the fashion there. I didn't know if I would find work in the fashion industry while I was there. And it turned out I didn't. I worked, I was not legal, so I didn't have working papers. So I was working at a cafe, being paid under the table. And then I found an internship at a documentary film production company.
What was it like being, in another country with, really no connections and no connection to the land?
Well, I think I went when I was 24, and I think 24 is a great age to do something like that because you're just fearless enough to do something like that, and you don't have the attachments that you might have a little bit later in life. I really felt fearless, and it's funny because now when I talk to people and they talk about living in another country, they're like, "Oh, I could never do that." They feel a little bit intimidated to do it, and honestly, I don't know that I would want to do it. Go live in a foreign land where I don't speak the language and I don't know anyone. I don't know how I did it. I think at the time I had a French boyfriend. He was half French, and so I worked at a really nice restaurant in San Francisco where we were exposed to French wines and French cuisine. And
sounds incredible.
And so I think that kind of turned my interest a little bit towards like, France sounds cool. Paris sounds like it would be an amazing thing to do. And I knew that once you finish college, you have just a little bit of time before you have to really start thinking about what you're going to do. So
figuring out like, what am I going to do with my life?
Yeah. Yeah. And I felt it was kind of an escape. It was kind of like I'm buying some time by doing this. But at the same time, I knew that I wanted to go explore the world. So I'm happy I did that.
So, you said that you moved from France back to San Francisco. Is that right?
I did, yes.
And what were you doing in San Francisco after France?
So I came back from France after living there for a year and I came with my new French boyfriend. And
this is another French boyfriend.
Yes. Yeah, the previous one was only half French. He was a French-American guy.
That's not real French.
Yeah.
It was just a test of waters.
Yeah, he just kind
Now we're
of
going
turned
full
me
French.
on to like French cinema and things, and in the French language, I kind of was more interested in it. So the French boyfriend, who is now my husband, his name is Thierry. We came back together. He is a journalist for French television. So for a while, I worked with him producing stories for television. For a while, I just was kind of working all over the place. I worked waiting tables at a French restaurant in Berkeley. I helped him produce stories. I worked with a production company as a production assistant and a coordinator. One job that I really liked, and I think I learned a lot of things that were applicable to now running this company, is prop styling with a production company.
That's got to be pretty fun.
Yeah, and I learned a lot because we had both the art director that I worked under and the photographers that I worked with, and the access that we had just by the quality of the projects we were working on were really all great. We had wonderful access to beautiful products, and then the photographers really taught me how to create a beautiful shot and what it meant to create desire in an image. And I really hadn't thought of that before. So that was very applicable when I later started my own blog and started to think about why is anyone going to buy this product? Why is anyone going to buy my bags? They can go to, Urban Outfitters, or they can go to Prada, or they can go to Barney's. What's going to make anyone follow this line? And I knew that it had to have an image behind it. And to do that, I needed beautiful imagery.
What did you learn most about storytelling at the time that you were, living in France and then came to San Francisco during this early kind of stages before you launched, Clare V and all the other products you worked on? What's something you learned about storytelling?
Well, I think when I returned, something very important to storytelling and to the creation of this brand was when I came back from France, it was really the beginning of blogs, very early day of blogs. And I followed a few of them, and at the time, the blogs were just diaries, basically, online.
Was it like a Tumblr or Blogspot or one of those?
Probably they were Blogspot. Yeah, I think it was before Tumblr for sure. And I followed a young woman who lived in Paris after I moved back from Paris. And I followed her blog. I read it every day and looked for new entries every day. She didn't necessarily write every day, but I always checked it. And I thought it was like a sitcom for me. It was like just keeping up with someone's life. And she did interesting things. She kind of worked in the fashion industry, and just by the fact that she lived in Paris was interesting to me. And what I gleaned from that was that people are interested in other people's lives. And so when I started my own brand and needed to figure out how I was going to market it, I thought, I'm just going to market it with a blog. I'm just going to start telling my story. And I bet there are going to be some people who are interested in my story just like I was interested in her story. I live in Los Angeles. It's a pretty desirable place to live that not everyone gets to live here or even visit here. It's pretty exotic if you're just watching it on TV.
You almost take it for granted sometimes. It's
always, yeah.
People are always like from the outside looking like, oh, LA is so glamorous and all this and that. But when you show them like your real life, like it might be more glamorous than other areas, but at the same time, it's like it's a fast city to live in, and there's a lot of challenging
and I think
parts too.
I realized that people were probably going to be interested in it somewhat. I lived in Los Angeles. I was married to a French man. I traveled often to France. I knew how to speak French. I had a young son, and I was interested in fashion. So I knew that I could use these things to illustrate me starting this brand. And so,
what year was this around?
2006.
So from 2001 to 2006, were you involved still in the fashion industry, or were you doing the culinary kind of stuff in San Francisco?
Oh, the waiting tables thing?
Yeah.
Culinary is a
I
nice
was like,
way of
let me
putting
make
it.
it sound a little bit more professional.
Yeah, waiting tables. I waited tables for many years, which I think is also a great preparation for entrepreneurs. I think the fact that we have to, I was a good waiter, and you have to keep a lot of stuff in your head and be very good at multitasking while remaining cool.
I feel like more than that also and I wish I did it. Maybe I still can.
Right.
But the experience that you get talking to different people, kind of hearing about their experiences or just the way they interact with one another or with you is, I think, so essential in business, because you need to know your people, you know your audience, you know who are your buyers. And I think waiting tables, honestly, is a great preparation for that.
Yeah, it's a very social endeavor for sure. And I guess if I hadn't been waiting tables at Universal Cafe in San Francisco, I never would have met my husband because, well, for many reasons, I probably wouldn't have gone to France. But I also met my husband through a former customer at Universal.
Really?
And, I moved to France. I didn't know anyone, but I had phone numbers, and it was before the internet, so before email. So I had numbers of friends, and those are the people that I called.
How did you meet him?
I met him at a dinner. There was a customer. There was a couple that used to come into Universal Cafe, and one day the guy came in alone, and I said, "Where's your friend?" And he said, "She moved to Paris." And I was like, "Oh, cool." And then I just kind of filed that in the back of my brain. And then one day when I decided to move to Paris and I saw that guy, I was like, I'm moving to Paris. Can I get her number? And so he gave me her number, and her name's Carrie Lieb, and I called her up, and we became great friends in Paris. She was my only American friend in Paris, and Carrie very early on invited me to a dinner party where I met my husband.
Very cool.
So it's 2006, and you're just kind of launching your blog, and you're getting into designing. Were you designing was it your own brand or company, or were you doing were you working somewhere else or working on other
No, I
projects?
started doing it myself. Well, I just started sewing my own bags. I knew how to sew. I learned how to sew in grade school, and I started making laptop bags because there were no cute laptop bags, and it was a relatively easy thing to make. But I really believed that there was a hole in the market, so I really did a lot of research on what kind of foam to use. And the tricky thing was that there were so many different sizes of laptops, so that really was a bummer to me. I really got
Was that
really
around the
tripped
time
up.
when becoming a thing?
Yeah,
Mac
the
Book
MacBooks
Pros,
were so cute. No, it was really
the
early
white
on.
ones, right? Like the thick.
There were the
MacBooks.
white ones, but before that, remember there was the blueberry one.
Oh,
And there
yeah.
was I
Yes.
had that blueberry one, and I had the first Apple. When I moved to Paris, I brought a laptop with me, which was like a brick of a gray.
Yeah.
I think I still have
big
it.
to
I would
carry
love
on.
to fire that up one day and see if it still works. Of course, you can't connect to the internet or anything with that. It's basically a typing machine. But I brought that with me to keep a journal while I was in France.
Do you still have that journal?
Well, I still have the computer, so I'm sure it would.
Somewhere on the hard drive.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting to look back at.
Yeah. So you're making laptop bags.
Yeah, so I was
What's the goal with that?
So I was making laptop bags, and friends of mine wanted them, and I thought, why are there no cute laptop bags? Apple is doing so much work to try to make laptops so cute. Why don't we have cute bags to put them in? And at the time, there was really not much. There was really kind of for the corporate woman, or there was tons of stuff for guys. And so I just believed that there was this market to do it. I started making them, and
was this like the Clare V brand, or was it
at
just
the time it was called Vivier.
okay?
So I still have all of the labels of the renditions of this brand that it's gone through. At the time, I called it just Vivier. And at some point, I don't remember, then I changed it to Clare Vivier just to use my entire name. I think someone told me, use your entire name because you won't get any trouble if you're using your entire name. So
Some intellectual property issues, yeah.
yeah, because that is actually you. So that's when at some point I started
Was
using.
there anyone in the world with the same name that you ever ran into any issues with ahead of time?
Well, yeah. Well, a little bit later. So in 2013, I was sued by Roger Vivier Company, which is in France, and it's owned by the Todds Group in Italy. And they sued me. What is it called when you...
Copyright infringement.
He's the lawyer.
Are you a lawyer?
I'm studying to be a lawyer, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But brand confusion. I'm
Got
not
it.
sure what it's called.
Even if it's overseas, a different country.
Well, so let me start over. In 2013, Roger...
Well, before you go, sorry to cut you off, but before you go there, so you launched your first store in
No, go ahead.
2012?
Yes.
Okay. And that was in Silver Lake.
Yes.
Okay. Why'd you choose Silver Lake?
Oh, because I live in Silver Lake.
Okay, good. I was wondering, I was like, no one starts businesses next to I live in Glendale, so I was like, no one starts any new companies next to my hometown.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to see that.
Yeah, I live in Silver Lake. I started, I opened my first store in 2011 with my neighbor at the time, my actual residential neighbor. Her name is Catherine Bentley, and she's a jeweler. And she and I were both running our businesses out of our homes. And one day we just saw each other on the street and started chatting and said, I'm looking for a studio. I got to get this business out of my house. It's kind of...
And when you say you were running it out of your home, was it like an online business at the time, or was it actually physically selling it out of your home?
Just online and shipping to wholesale accounts at the time.
Gotcha.
So Catherine and I were like, hey, well, if we see a space, let's maybe get a space together. So we found a space in the neighborhood on Mitchell Terena that was a storefront. And we decided that we were going to put our businesses in the back of the storefront and just have a few hundred square feet up the front of the windows to sell our goods. And it became clear very quickly that this was a great idea. Both of our lines did really well in this very small amount of space. So when the corner space became available, which was 2 doors down, I jumped on it, and that became our first real store, the first Clare Vivier store.
And at the time, you were still doing the cute laptop bags, or was it handbags and?
By then, it was a full collection.
I'm curious though how it evolved, like from in those 6 years, from like doing the laptop bags to like handbags and other accessories.
Sorry, we've kind of jumped ahead
It's
very
fine,
quickly. Yeah. From 2006, when I started with laptops, well, it just kind of grew very organically. When I had the laptop bags, then I needed a tote to put the laptop in. So then I started making totes, and I was making everything out of canvas because I didn't know how to sew on leather yet, and I didn't have the correct sewing machine to do that. And then from totes came smaller bags. Like I did a small crossbody that was called the mini sack. One of the things that came directly out of the laptop bags, which was a very good business decision because it turned out to be a very big part of my business for quite a few years, are the clutches. And the clutches were just derived simply by shrinking the laptop envelope. And I remember I walked into a store one time to try to sell my laptop envelopes, and they said, yeah, these are cute, but why don't you make them a little smaller and just make them into handbags? And I was like, great idea. I'll be back in 2 days. So I went home and made smaller versions and brought them back and sold them there.
And so it was just you doing everything at the time?
Yeah.
And was your like husband involved with the business, or was he still doing his thing?
Still a journalist. Yeah, he's still a journalist. Yeah.
So what was one of the biggest challenges of opening that first store?
The first challenge was to figure out who was going to run the store and who was going to merchandise the store to make it look like me and my vision, because I knew that I was actually running the business and didn't have a lot of time to do that. And I remember panicking one day, just like, what am I doing? Who's going to run the store? And who's going to make this store look like me? So my only answer to that was to ask my very good friend, Greta Heikemer, who had a job at the time. And I just knew that she understood my company really well and knew me really well and knew the vision of the company.
Was she a designer, like an architect or a designer?
At the time, no, she was working at a showroom. So she was working in the fashion industry, selling wholesale. And I said, Greta, would you ever consider quitting your job and come working for me to run the store and merchandise the store? And she did it. She jumped, and she has been with me ever since.
Wow.
And
That's a good friend.
yeah, it's been a great partnership or collaboration. She's now our design director, so she and I designed the collection together, and she continues to merchandise the stores. She does the first look, and then we have the store managers and the retail operations manager keep the aesthetic, but she does the first look.
I'm curious though, at the time when you first opened your store, where was Clare Vivier, the company, at the time? Like, how were you? I mean, not to get into like sales figures or anything like that, but like, where were you at? Like, how big was the company?
In 2012, when I opened my first store, I was also consequently in talks with partners for them to buy a portion of the company. Stephen Allen, who is a retailer from New York, introduced me to his partners at the time, which was a company called Bedrock, run by someone named Tom Kartsotis and his CFO, Randy Kircho. And I was getting to the point in my company where I was experiencing a level of success that I dreamed of. It was really like dreams were coming true. Like I had reached over $1 million in sales, which was huge to me at the time because I started this company out of a room in my house, and I always knew, I always had a lot of confidence in this company, and I always thought we could be a really big company. But, getting to that point where you're seeing these sales figures, and I had, one bookkeeper, and we're just chugging along, we're cranking out. And Stephen introduced me to these partners, and we got along well. They're very not traditional partners, and they think outside the box, and they were amenable to my lack of how do you say business experience and
was it for
structure.
growth purposes? Like what was the partnership for? Like was it to grow the company like strategically, or was it for another
Yeah,
reason?
for me it was 100% strategic because I had never run a company before,
Right.
and I really wanted it to be successful. And I had heard so many scary or depressing stories of designers who start companies, but we are at the end of the day creative people, and we don't run companies. Really, we don't. I am not someone who has ever been comfortable looking at spreadsheets and doing QuickBooks and forecasting, and it's just not my strong point. And I feel like as an entrepreneur, you really have to know what you're strong at and what you're not strong at, and get people to fill those needs, because if you don't have that, you're not going to grow. So the fact that I was introduced to these people and we got along well, and I really liked their philosophy. I liked the idea that they were in it for the long run, and I didn't have to write a business plan. I didn't go to business school or anything. He just said, write me a 1-page email and tell me what you want to do with your company, and tell me what the vision of it and where you see it growing and why you would like to have partners. And I did that, and that's basically all we needed.
And Bedrock were they an investment firm, or were they a manufacturing company?
No, it's an investment firm.
Okay,
but it's called Bedrock Manufacturing.
So do they like only invest in like companies that manufacture? Is that it?
They invest in consumer products, yeah. But yeah, for me, I really liked Randy Kircho. He was a CFO with Tom for many, many years, and the fact that I was going to be able to have someone oversee the business side of it just really made a lot of sense to me. And we've been partners ever since, and it's been working out great.
And now, like you mentioned earlier, you're at 7 stores. Was it easier to open 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or was that still for you, a challenge?
Which, by the way, happened very quickly. Like every year, you open up a new store.
Right?
Pretty much.
Yeah. No, each store got to be easier and easier. There's challenges, but they're not the same challenges. I did, with the first store, I had never even thought about who was going to run the store, who was going to make it look like the brand. Once we had that first store, we knew what the brand aesthetic was. We knew what we wanted the next stores to look like, and we knew where our market was. So, for example, the second store was in Nolita on Elizabeth Street, and that just made a ton of sense because we knew we had a lot of customers in New York City, and that was easy. I mean, it wasn't easy, but it's been really successful.
Looking back, when you were first, designing those laptop, cases, did you ever envision that this is where you would be, a decade later?
I really wanted it to be where I would be, and I believed it was possible. So yes.
That's great. Because a lot of folks that we talk to, what they've done is they've just kind of started and, they ended up having success, but there wasn't always a clear vision from the beginning. Do you feel like the vision that you had back then helped you get to where you are today, and hopefully where you really want to be even, further down the line?
I think so. I think you should always, no, I shouldn't say should because there's no should. I think it has definitely helped me to have had this belief in the brand from the beginning. Yeah, I think that's definitely gotten us to be where we are today.
So you have 7 stores now.
Yes.
Where do you see the brand going from here? I mean, whether it's growing the storefronts or adding more products, like is there a clear path now, or is it more so just day by day seeing where it goes?
It's not day by day because we're very intentional of everything we do, and I have a great team right now. This is my first year with a president at the company. In March of last year, I hired a woman named Molly Leonetti, and it's been really nice to have someone at her level as a partner in growing this company. And we're very intentional of everything we do. We're not opening another store in 2018. The retail market is really kind of weird, and more than that, I would say that I discovered at 7 stores with the size of team that we are, which is still relatively small. We've got 30 people working in this office and about 55 people with all the store employees. We're still relatively small, and I really saw that how it taxed our in-house retail ops team which consists of one and a half person basically. It was really a lot for that one person to handle 7 stores. So I really thought, unless we're going to be very intentional about growing retail only, and we decide to put money into that department of hiring more people to run those stores, we really need to slow it down on growth in retail. And because the retail industry is weird right now, real estate's weird, the rents are really high, people are buying online, as we all know. It's not our big priority to open something in 2018. We're looking at maybe the end of 19. But our e-commerce site is doing extremely well, and we are really focusing on how to grow that consumer base, and I think we're doing a really great job with that. Besides that, we need to grow international. We have a lot of room to grow in our wholesale accounts, even domestically. We have been growing a lot with Nordstrom this year, for example, and we have a lot of room to grow with big wholesale accounts. So
I'm glad you brought up the topic of retail in LA, because every time I drive down the streets now, left and right, stores are closing down. How has Clare V, the company, been able to survive that, but also recognize it and make maybe transition might be the wrong word, but make a stronger push towards the e-commerce market?
Well, I've always been extremely conservative with, and I don't know if conservative is the right word. I think it's
cognizant, maybe.
Yeah, and I think I don't think it's conservative. So what I'm getting at is I don't go into neighborhoods where the rents are extremely high, and I've always been very confident that our customer is going to come to us where we are. And my first priority when finding a location for a store is whether or not I like the location and whether or not it feels authentic to the brand. So I don't need to go where the rent is the highest. I for example, would never go to Melrose Place, for example. The rents are extremely high, or say Rodeo Drive or something. I don't know what the rents are at Rodeo, but streets that are Hills, have big names, because our customer is seeking us out. If people come into our stores because they just happen to, it's always a wonderful discovery for them. But I don't need to be on the beaten path. So that's been a savior for us because our rents are affordable and our operation costs are just doable. I mean, I think that so many brands just kill themselves by being, outpricing themselves from the get-go.
Yeah.
On the topic of doing things with intent and just branding overall, especially for folks who may want to get into, the fashion industry and designers and whatnot, what would you say makes Clare V, the brand and the products, unique compared to other brands that are in the similar space?
Well, I think our design, first and foremost, is really good, and I think it appeals to a wide array of women, from young women, teenagers, to their moms and to their aunts, and to just a very wide range of economic status as well. So what we've tried to do is keep things kind of an affordable form of luxury because it feels special. And how do you make something feel special? Well, you have to, number one, have a beautiful product to start with. You have to have something that people desire. And then for me, it was really having a story behind it. And it's been really important for me to keep in contact with our customer, and I've been able to do that through our social media. Before it was the blog, and now it's Instagram primarily, but also it's going to the in-store events and to going to our stores on the weekends and just meeting the customer and telling people who I am and telling people how I've started the company. And it always really resonates with people. I mean, look at your podcast. It's really, people love to know that there's a story behind it, and that's why you might have this podcast. It's, you want to hear people's story, and it's been really important to the brand. And I think what that does is just make the brand extremely authentic. It never feels that we're presenting any product that doesn't feel right. Even all the collaborations we do, like we did something with Tom's this year, which is a brand that is a much lower price point than ours, but it made sense for us because we made it make sense. It's a Los Angeles company. We're friends with John Whitlich, who's the creative director, and we don't do shoes. And I was confident that we were going to be able to design cute product that was going to look good in our stores and our customer would want. And on top of that, we are a very socially minded company as well. And the fact that Tom's always has a give back was very attractive to us. And we were able to decide with them where the give back was going to be, which we decided was going to be the Downtown Women's Center. So to do something to help homelessness in Los Angeles.
I'm curious, with where the brand is and the company is at now with 7 stores, and I'm sure more to come. I know outside of work, you're obviously a wife, you're a mother. How do you balance all of this?
Well, it's really hard to balance, and I don't know that anyone really knows how to do it. I think.
I guess we can get more specific. Like, do you have like a certain method that it's like a time management type of thing where like, you break out your day in a certain way, or is it kind of just all over the place? Like what efforts do you make to kind of just cope with it and make it happen?
Well, certain things can't happen. Like I probably don't exercise as much as I would like to do because in the morning it is the only time that I can exercise. So, or in the weekends, which when I do have time to do that. But I was going to say every morning I wake up with my son when he goes to school so that I can spend that time with him. And then after work, I have a lot of work events that I have to go to, so I'll go to those, but I'll try to come home early to be with him. And then I think what is the most important thing in balancing work and life is to have a partner that supports you and is able to really take some of the load off. And my husband, Thierry, has been a really great partner to me in the last couple of years because he, for the first, I don't know how many years of our partnership, our couple, our marriage, he was really the primary bread earner of the family, and he worked all the time and he traveled a lot. And then when my company started to take off and we kind of saw that there was some great momentum happening and I had to travel to New York often, he was able to kind of scale back his work, and I think he was very intentional about that so that someone could be home with our son and someone could also just be home to anchor the home, and
which is a very tough thing to do, especially like when you're married to an entrepreneur. And if you're an entrepreneur yourself, if you're both entrepreneurs, it's even harder. But, having that balance, it sounds like you were able to figure that out, which is great.
Yeah, we're doing the best we can. It's not perfect. I don't know anyone who's been able to figure it out exactly perfect. I think we all do the best we can.
Claire, one thing I wanted to talk to you about, that I'm genuinely curious about, and, it's definitely a topic and an issue that's been rather prevalent, unfortunately, in the United States and, I'm sure throughout the world as well. And for purposes of, whenever we release this podcast, I'll just say recently, recently we had learned about the passing of Kate Spade, and shortly after that of Anthony Bourdain, and both due to mental health. And there's been so many, of course, other instances of this. And I don't want to sound too dark in this episode, but it is a real issue that happens and people suffer from it. How have you been able to keep a positive, I guess, mental health, or been able to work on that as a founder, as a mother, as a wife, as someone who's doing so much? How do you deal with that?
Well, first of all, I think I would love to comment on Kate Spade because she has just recently passed this week. It's been a pretty intense week, and I just would love to say how just how sad I am at her passing, because she was such an industry trailblazer. There's really not many other people that I can look to as an icon in the handbag industry. And I knew her husband, Andy, and I had a great amount of respect for both of them because I think they had so much creativity, and they were very smart, and they built a company, and they did it, the thing that we're all trying to do. They built the company, made it huge, and
Sold it.
Yeah, and eventually sold it. And I'm not saying that we're all trying to sell our companies, but they were the epitome of success. They did. They made the dream happen. Yeah. And I'm just it's extremely sad to see what happened. And I had never met Kate, so I don't know what she was living through. But obviously, through Andy's statements, he said she had been experiencing severe depression for the past couple of years. So. I very fortunately have not experienced that in my life. It seems like it's more and more in the press, and I think a lot of people are talking about it on social media these days, and maybe people think that people are being, how do you say, when they're trying to exploit it a little bit on social media. I've seen people kind of say, oh, you shouldn't talk about that so much. And I think, well, why not? I don't think there's anything wrong with talking about, and I don't think people are trying to get popular by talking about it.
No, I don't think so.
I think that I think we're in a great period of time where people are acknowledging that it's just a fact. It's an illness that some people have, and that they need to get help for it. Fortunately, I don't have mental illness in my family, and I haven't experienced it myself. However, I do employ a lot of people, and there's a lot of emotions that come up, and there's a lot of dealing with a lot of different illnesses and people. And as a business owner, you really have to be extremely sensitive to people's emotions and feelings and illnesses. You don't know really if someone is chronically ill or if they are not, but you just have to be extremely sensitive about it.
Yeah, after Anthony Bourdain's passing, I was really thinking, like, going back to like high school, like one of the main things I remember, and I wasn't the best student, but like I always remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which was like, it's very directly correlated with like happiness and depression. And in college, I took like a science of happiness class, and I can't help but think like, folks who almost seem like, the top of the pyramid is like self-actualization, right? Like your love and belonging, your shelter, everything is, you're past that, and you're at a place where you're like enlightened almost, where you're living for yourself, but more though you're living for others. Like Anthony Bourdain, for example, traveled the world and was immersed in all these different cultures and met so many people and helped so many people. And then for him to pass like that, it's almost like, you can't help but think, especially as for founders, like when you're working towards something and you have this huge vision in mind, and you don't think about, what it would be like when you're there. It's kind of like you need to take the necessary steps while you're building the company, so you're not like sacrificing like your personal life and all these things once you get to that point where you always want it to be. you haven't like looked back and like just completely just shattered your life. So it's, I mean, that was kind of like one thing that really like resonated with me. I was like really thinking about that. So I don't know if you have
it's
any thoughts on that.
definitely hard. I mean, it's we work as entrepreneurs. We work a lot. Our work is our life.
Yeah.
There's really no, especially if the business has your name on it and it's kind of built on your image. I mean, I almost feel like I'm never not working. Fortunately, I really love what I do, and I love my product. I love all the people I work with, so that really helps. But I can imagine it must be extremely hard. I mean, especially if you're someone who eventually sells your business. I don't even...
Yeah.
If you're not taking those steps to really enjoy your life and be comfortable with where you are at every step of the way, when you stop doing what you're doing, you're going to be completely lost, it seems to me.
Claire, to end on a happier note, you traveled in France and you worked you waited tables. I won't call it culinary. What is your favorite wine?
Well, that's very easy. My husband is from the Loire Valley in France, and we are big fans of red wine from the Loire Valley. So I wouldn't say that I have a favorite wine.
Just a region.
There's a region. There's Chinon, Saumur, Saint-Nicolas de Bourgogne. There's what else? There's Gamay. There's a lot of really great wines that come out of this region. So that's an easy one.
I got to check it out.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and I think that obviously the storytelling background is something that is not only admirable, but it also I think helped this story come together. And I think that our listeners are going to be able to really piece together everything that you talked about, and whether it was your journey and whether it was the fearlessness of moving to France and all the topics that we discussed. We really appreciate it, and we can't wait to see what Clare V, the brand, and what Clare Vivier, the person, become in the future.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Claire.
I really appreciate it.